Hello, we are live again. How are you all? So today our live will be in English and we have a special guest, Gary. He is an English teacher that I know for a long time actually. So he helps my clients during the coaching process in answering the famous question, in preparing them to answer the famous question, tell me about yourself. So today we're going to talk about English, business English, and how to better prepare for an interview in regards to the English grammar. Because I bet, Gary,
Yeah, I
you
can
have some kind of, mistakes or accent that it's particular from Brazil, right?
for sure. I think what I see a lot with your clients is that when they come and meet me, they're absolutely brilliant. They're in relation to how to answer a question. They're really well versed. An awful lot of the time as well, when I meet people, their grammar is really, really good. Their vocabulary is very tidy. It's that there's not many mistakes at all when there's no pressure on. But typically, what we see is then a situation whereby, if we're in an interview and the vocabulary changes ever so slightly from an interviewer, that we're used to being asked to tell me about yourself, but it changes, which is really common. It can happen anytime, anywhere with anybody. We tend to panic. Or if we think we've made a little bit of a mistake in our head, then at that point we start to say to ourselves, okay, maybe those typical mistakes that people make all the time start to creep in. And that's when we start to get more and more nervous. But what I would typically find is that everybody who's going for an interview should go to or who's thinking of going for one, should go to as many as they can now. Get out
Yes.
there, get more used to it, because you'll realize that you know yourself, Tana, they're not these scary processes. And if you've done one or two, you'll realize that the more you go to, the better you'll be. But we'll
Exactly.
realize that, yeah, there could be a few, as I would say in English, curveballs. You could get asked a few funny words, funny phrases in there,
Yeah.
but they probably mean, number one, stuff that you already understand. And number two, you probably know how to answer it really well. So just don't let yourself get into that situation where you are mixing up your vocabulary and you're using funny bits and pieces of grammar where you don't really usually do that in your day to day.
Exactly. Gary, tell me or tell us about yourself.
Sure, yeah,
What's
of
your
course I will.
story? We I didn't even introduce you properly.
No worries at all. Yeah, don't worry. Right, well, I'll take you right back to the start. How long do you have? I've got a big history of languages. So I've been learning languages like many of your clients for 26 years at this stage. Kind of formally when I was in school, I was used to learning French and Spanish. We usually do that in Ireland here. I'm Irish, obviously. So I learned what we're used to using or learning maybe one language in school here. I took up two. I enjoy languages. I enjoy the process of formally learning those in school. But then it was when I left school that I started to really take up a little bit more of an interest in languages, and they became a bit more of a communicative thing for me. And that's when I really got used to speaking, really got used to using my languages and becoming proficient in French and Spanish a little bit differently. I got used to the nuances of how you might, hear different words and how nerve-wracking that is for people. So I think I understand that to a certain extent, and I hope that's an advantage for any clients that I work with. And then a few years after I left school, I took up Portuguese. I was just interested. I went on holidays to Brazil. I heard the language. I thought the people were nice, really, really cool people. I wanted to get on. I didn't want to feel ridiculous for not knowing anything. So I took up Portuguese. And then I started teaching. We met up. We decided to work together. And
Yeah.
it's at that point that really I kind of take over from you at one point or another in the process of helping your clients. And I run through some interview questions. And that's it.
Exactly. Yay! So Gary actually, he meets my elite career consulting clients, the ones that buy, like the full service, and he talks to them about the interview question, which is the most important. Tell me about yourself. That's what I suggest. Of course, I don't know exactly what you talk about in your
No.
meeting.
Well, no, that is exactly it, and we do go through that. Um, Basically, that is where every interview I think will start as well. I think you'd agree. So, um, you can get any number of questions in there. I mean, there'll be the weaknesses, the strengths and your weaknesses questions. There'll be, you know, working on your, there'll be a situation type question maybe from time to time. But to tell me about your question is your opportunity to basically say, look, this is on my CV. That's what you're looking for. I've got brilliant experience doing this thing, so employ me because of that. All it is you going in, as far as I'm concerned, and telling a story about the experience that they know you have, you know that you have, and saying that in really clear, simple English where you're telling a story from A to B, and you're saying between the years of X, Y, and Z, I was working in this place. It worked out very well for me because I was able to benefit the company in this particular way. There were maybe X, Y, or Z issues in this sense, but I was able to overcome them, see them, and I had benefit for the whole company. So if you can simply, in that tell me about your question, match up what's on the job description to what you know, it's going to be a piece of cake. It's going to be absolutely simple for you in English. And I think there's no need to worry about it because if you get asked to go for an interview, they know that you know that stuff that's on that job description. And to tell me about yourself is you're right. I do know it. And the results are this and this and this, as far as I'm
Very.
concerned.
Do you have any tips to give to in regards to the grammar? Okay, so any particular words or phrase that they can bear in mind when they're going to create a structure, an answer with this structure?
Of course I do. I think what I typically find is, I said this at the start, your clients are, they're brilliant. And every time I meet them, their English is fabulous. Okay. But it's then at that point that I have to put them under a little bit more pressure. Okay. And it's in the situation where we're under a little bit more pressure all the time and we're demanding an answer immediately, demanding that really good answer and trying to maybe mix up that question so that we're using different vocabulary at different times, that maybe a few mistakes do pop into the answer. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. Your English doesn't have to be totally clean and tidy ever. Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't ever. And it's really important to remember that some of the best clients I've ever worked with, they've been working in businesses for a very long time. Their English is not incredibly good. It's not perfect because you don't need incredibly good grammar. But yeah, having said that, sometimes you will worry that and you become self-conscious because one or two patterns will slip in. And your pronunciation is your pronunciation might go a little bit crazy, you might go a little bit askew, but it's nothing to worry about, like we just agreed on. I think
Yeah.
you'll still get the job. Your experience will be key. That's the first thing that I really want to say. Okay, so don't be worrying about anything too much. But some of the mistakes grammar wise that I would see in relation to people who are Brazilian Portuguese speakers who are learning English, now obviously you can't be general, okay? I'm not going to say that everybody does this.
But
Of course they don't.
everybody makes mistakes.
No, of course we're not going to say that everybody does these things because we're from anyone else. No, never. Okay, but typically the kind of things that I would be seeing all the time in my classes, be they with your clients or other clients, would be the likes of double negatives. So what people find quite difficult to do is to say, because it's naturally a translation from Portuguese to English, as far as I know, for things like I don't want nothing, or I didn't
Oh,
work nowhere. Now, if we're saying that kind of thing, it's not exactly right, because when we have a don't and we have a nothing in that sentence.
nothing.
So if we're able to switch that second negative to another, I call it like a positive negative. It is still a negative word, like anything, for example. It still suggests negativity. It is negativity, but you're just saying it in a more grammatically English way. So that kind of thing would be very common. Again, it's easy to clear up. It's not a make or break situation ever. But if you could look for that kind of a pattern in a grammar book, I can give suggestions for grammar books, maybe not online. But if somebody wants to email me, wants to contact me, I can give good suggestions for grammar books in future to be working with. The answers will be there. The things like, for example, there's something that is very, very common it's a small thing to clear up, but what I often see is, and I don't know if I'm explaining this too well, but if I say to you, I'm going to go out more one time before I leave Ireland, okay? If I'm saying more one time, we could switch that up and we could say one more time. People do this all the time, okay? Now that's because we put the number in a different place. So I need to buy more three things rather than that's not correct. But whether if we say I need to buy three more things rather than more three things, that would be a really, really nice thing to do in English.
I do that.
Look, that's because it's a really weird construction that we have in English. It's very common in, I think, all Latin languages, if I'm not mistaken, certainly Portuguese, but it's the opposite. So just literally say to yourself all the time in English, okay, listen, I'm gonna break the rules. This is what I often say to myself in Portuguese. I'm breaking the rules in Portuguese and I'm going backwards. I'm speaking odd. I know this is wrong in my head, but grammatically for Tana, this is right. So I'm gonna switch.
Then
So when you put the no,
say, for example, if I'm in an interview, right,
yeah,
and I say, so I had to change two, instead of saying change two more processes, I should say I changed more two processes.
the opposite. I'm
The
saying that wrong. So what a lot of people say is I'm changing more two processes, but actually what you need to say is I'm changing two more processes. So
two more
we have
processes.
that. Yeah, I explained it wrong. So actually the incorrect is more two processes, but the correct is two more processes. That's
I would
the pattern that you'll see in English the whole way around, the whole way along. So I think you were right there. Actually, don't worry about that. But that is something typical that I see all the time. Something that's very difficult for people because they don't exist too much in Portuguese and in any other language is our phrasal verbs. They're
Oh yeah.
so hard to learn. Everyone finds them nasty and stinking, and the way of learning them is to learn them in context.
Yeah, using it. three
Yeah,
years to actually start using it.
I,
It
I
was
think.
only it was only past present. That's it. For
d- d-
3 years. Past present, that's it.
Well, look, what you need to do is just say to yourself with these, okay, I can't really avoid them. We use them all the time in English. They're formal, they're informal, they're business, they're whatever kind of English. So what we're going to do is learn them in context. The more you talk to people, okay, the more you listen to somebody, the more you'll hear them saying phrasal verbs. Guaranteed. You won't with a native English speaker, they'll be using phrasal verbs all the time. Now, if you're learning them out of context, it's so difficult to grasp the hold of these things. If you're learning them also by verb by verb by verb, that's a really difficult way of learning them. So if you're learning all the phrasal verbs related to put and then go and then in and then out, that's just like a list. It doesn't really make any sense to me. So I'm a big believer that when we're learning our English, we need to put it all in context. So if you're learning your phrasal verbs and any other grammar, by the way, in context, and we're starting to speak more to as many people as we can, and we're starting to talk more in relation to business English, if that's the kind of English that we're practicing for. But all English is good, and then we will realize that the more we're talking, the better our listening gets, the more in tune we'll be what people are saying, and that phrasal verb, we'll realize that there's a preposition coming after it and it means something. So when you see that person doing that thing, you'll associate with that again. But phrasal verbs aren't in other languages. They're difficult for people to use. So for that reason, but get talking and they'll become far more natural for you. Get reading, obviously, as well. Get listening, get watching, and you'll see.
Audiobook. I love audiobooks. I run, like I jog a
Mhm.
lot. And then I'm always, like listen to a book. And I
Yeah,
love it. Because I'm
I,
always, learning new words and, like also getting the accent. Because it's really hard for us Brazilians to pronounce the words. I
no,
used to pronounce salmon like salmon all the time, salmon, salmon, just like like the Portuguese way. And then one day, an Irish friend stopped me. She was like, "Tana, I have to tell you that it's like we love to eat sushi. I know we love salmon, but you're just saying wrong all the time. It's salmon. There is no L in the middle. You don't pronounce the L. And I was like, oh God.
And I think, right, the way that you get good at pronunciation, the way that I got good at pronunciation through listening was that what I did was I listened to people saying in Portuguese, salmon, all day long. Okay. Now, if you're in context and I'm hearing you saying salmon, 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 and I'm actually listening to you, okay, I'm forcing myself to actually, okay, go, okay, Tana's saying salmon this way, and it has to be done like that. It's embarrassing, okay? Maybe it's really awkward when your friends have to say to you, no, 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 you've done this wrong. But look, if we are listening really intently to the likes of audiobooks, we'll hear good pronunciation then as well. So that's that's how to get through phrasal verbs sometimes. That's how to get through improving your listening. But something that people don't do improving their listening is, just like you said there, improving your pronunciation that way. And I would think that listening to improve your pronunciation, hearing how I speak, studying how I speak is amazing. Well, not me, but people in general.
Yeah.
A lot of the polyglots will say, people who speak these 5, 10, 15, 20 languages, these geniuses, they will be in a situation whereby they're studying people when they're talking, and study that podcast when you're talking. Study the way the intonation of the voice goes up and down. You know this now. When you're asking a question, how does your voice go up and down when you're asking a question? And that will be key to your future pronunciation of
Yeah.
salmon, like salmon, and not like something else. Or it will be key also to your understanding of phrasal verbs, things like that. And will I keep on going? Am I
Yeah.
good?
Go ahead,
Okay,
please.
good. Stop me, by the way. I could keep on talking, Tana, forever. Okay, ask me
Don't
questions.
worry.
Stop me. Keep me talking. But
We talk English. Go ahead.
Great. Okay, thank you. Make sure that your subject verb agreement is correct. Okay, as well. That's a little thing, but it's very very important. So make sure that in situations where you're speaking in the present simple, for example, you say she work. It's a very simple tip, but a lot of people confuse she works, I work, you work, he, she, it works, we work, you work, they work. So if we're speaking all the time, that helps a lot. If we're watching, if we're reading, if we're seeing correct grammar, we're just going to assimilate it naturally as well. And that's the best way to do things too. But in terms of that subject verb agreement, maybe have a little grammar book with you as well, if you want a little guide with you. It's not necessarily super duper important for everybody. It's not vital, but I do actually have for my Portuguese here a grammar book. I just dip into it every once in a while just to see those little subject verb agreement rules, things like that. That one is quite nice. The differentiation then between, next point, 2 and 4 is it's a nasty. 2, the
Two
preposition,
and
the difference between the
four.
prepositions 2 and 4. Okay.
That I still have problems using 2 and 4.
Yeah, okay. Well, there are rules that we can go by. So we can say things like, for example, when we're using 4, that would often explain the reason why we're doing something, and 2 would often explain movement between two different points, etc. So there are specific rules, but when 2 and 4 become a little bit more complex and complicated is when they're part of a phrasal verb, or when they're part of a verb itself. So people, I think, could learn to do would be maybe to learn verbs as part of a phrase or part of a chunk. Okay. So rather than um
2 and 4
think
is
of
really
4 and
complicated.
2 just like single words, maybe learn to put them with a verb, so you're then learning to listen to look for. And in that instance, you don't have to think about the rule of where to put 4 and 2 in that instance, because that rule does break that rule of reason being 4 and movement being 2.
Move
So
to reason 4. Okay.
so in that instance, yeah, the rules between 2 and 4 can be really complicated. That can be very complex. But what we should do is speak more, listen more, really listen to how I'm using 2 and 4, and you'll realize that I'm using them correctly. Again, see if when you're reading, and read things that are related to something you're interested in. Again, read things that are at your level. They don't have to be too highbrow. you're able to notice that maybe a preposition like to and for is written after a verb, or it's written in a particular way, and understand the context of what's going on, and that will help your prepositions a lot. We've talked about kind of the basic tenses. Make sure that your past, your present, your futures. This is really tricky. Your past, your present, your futures. When something goes a little bit worrying in an interview question, are okay. So when you're doing that tell me about yourself question, okay, we all know how to answer it. You've prepared everyone very well for this. But what typically will happen is that we'll hear a word that we don't like. We'll hear a question that we're not too sure about, or not a question, but we hear that tell me about yourself question asked in a different way,
Yeah.
and we panic and everything goes wrong, and the
It blanks.
plan goes out the window. Basically the plan goes out that window just in front of me right there. So what we do then at that point is we have to make sure that prior to that we've gone through our basic grammar, because it's the basics of our grammar that often go wrong, apart from the typical Brazilian Portuguese mistakes that we're looking at here, the likes of making sure that at least your past, present, future simple verbs are really clean and tidy. Looks so professional, so nice, and then you'll be into the job. Once you get into the job, we talked about this earlier, you can improve your grammar more and more and more, and you might find insecurities about your grammar once you're there. But really, if you can at least by the time you get to the job have ideas about your past, presents, futures, something like that, clean and tidy and happy, you'll have no problems getting a job, or
What
answering
I
that question.
what I think that happens a lot with Brazilians is that we have this thing, okay? So to tell a story. So when the recruiter asks the question, okay, so
Mm-hmm.
tell me about yourself, or give me an example in the past when you I don't know, when you solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is the person starts to tell the story as it was happening now, like in the first person. And like it's like, so then I said that, and the other person's answered that, and I said that, and the other person did that, and I'm like, no, I don't want to know the conversation between you and your manager. I just want to know what happened. So I don't know why we have this how can I say this way of explaining things, telling like the story of that situation, to understand, not the situation itself.
So do you mean that you give almost too much detail and you don't give specifics of what's happening?
For example, so if they instead of answering, oh, so I improved the process, which my manager was having an issue, and my colleagues were having issues. And with this, and I changed the process by doing ABC. They go like, so my manager came to me and said that we were having problems in the team. So then I said to my manager that we should change the process. And then my manager, do you know, like it's like they they give the full narrative of the
Well,
answer.
sure, let's be a bit more matter of fact. Okay, if you have a bit of a code, I suppose, going into an interview, then not a code, that sounds too mathematical, too methodical, but if you have an idea in your head, okay, when I'm going into this tell me about yourself question, or whether I'm going into a situation based question, okay, what do they want exactly? They probably want, in the situation based question, let's just move it aside a little bit, identify a problem, maybe identify a solution to that problem, and give a benefit to what happened there. If you're saying about yourself those three words all the time in your head, then you won't go too wrong. You won't start wandering all over the place. And yeah, maybe what we're saying is once we wander, our English goes a bit strangely, and we then start talking out of pattern. We then start talking out of uh tense, and things go a little bit strangely all over the place. But if we have that structure, at least once we go in, then we'll be able to say the problem was this. For example, in our situation question, the problem was this, the solution was that, and the benefit was that. At least then we've got the idea of a structure, and we shouldn't go too far out of our past, our presents, and our futures. for
Yeah, very,
argument's sake, or we shouldn't get our basic grammar wrong in that instance.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, of course. And Gary, we have actually a very good question here.
Sure.
Gustavo Scomparin is asking, how can we ask politely to the recruiter to repeat herself or himself if you know, like they don't understand the question. So how can we ask in a nice way to repeat the question if you know, like the candidate didn't understand?
Sure. No, I'm just making notes here as we speak, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably natural. If you're going in for an interview and you're from abroad, my Portuguese won't be spot on perfect, and there may be vocabulary that we don't know, okay? Um, so yeah, it's okay for me to ask somebody to rephrase the question. I imagine. Am I correct in saying that? So look, would you mind just rephrasing what we're saying here? I mean, I hope you can back me up with say there, or would you mind saying the question in another way? That goes for English language tests as well. If you're in an English language test, there's nothing wrong with going back and saying, look, could you rephrase the question a little bit differently?
Yeah,
Because in that instance, if you're saying it again and again and again, that's not good. But
yeah,
the likelihood is that you will understand another piece of vocabulary relatively well that somebody is using. And it's only natural that we can't know all the vocabulary in the world. Okay. So when somebody does maybe speak too quickly, when somebody maybe does use a vocabulary that we're not used to, or a structure that we're not used to, yeah, it can be said again, of course. Yeah.
very good. What I suggest is never ever say sorry, I didn't understand. Just say exactly what Gary, you know, like said. Can you repeat? Can you repeat the question? Can you rephrase the question, please? That's
Yeah.
it. Don't go like, sorry, I didn't understand the question. And what? Generally, you know, you just go nervous and you just, you know, like in a not polite way ask the recruiter to repeat, but it's like what, you know, just asking what only by, you know, like the sake of asking, it's not really good.
And instead of often saying will you and can you, we often say here as well a little bit more formally, would you and could you. So could you repeat that please, or would you? So instead of what a lot of people say is will you say that again please, but instead of that, would you mind repeating yourself, something like that. I think that's fine. But if we just switch words that I think we all know, like will you and can you, to the could or the would version of those modal verbs, I think that's a perfectly acceptable thing to say, and I hope you come back.
So that's the reason why Irish people, you know, keep asking, will you do this?
Yeah, we're
Instead of can you, and you're will you, and I'm like, what? After 3 years, I understood that was will you do something instead of can you, because it's more, it's nicer.
it is, it's nicer, and again, would you as well. And there's a funny thing that when we're in interviews here, it is very formal, and we do have that formal way of switching our language all the time as well. So I mean, we're not always very polite in the office, of course we're not. There's an informality there all the time, but yeah, it is very, very normal to use that formal language in the office here in Ireland. So if you switch things around and you say the would or the could or the may I rather than can I, something like that, those kind of words that we would use. And if anybody again wants to get in touch with me, or I could recommend books or, you know, ideas of places to go to hear those things. But if you're Googling all of this information, if you're Googling your area of work, if you're Googling company websites and things like that, your sector related to this stuff, and if you're chatting to us enough, we'll be able to give you tips and tricks on that stuff as well. But
thank you very much. That's really good. Gustavo just thanked you. He's like,
oh, yeah.
thank you very much.
You're more than welcome, mate. You're more than welcome. Thank you for getting in touch. Pleasure to talk to you.
João is asking, what kind of things can we ask? So what things to say when I'm nervous in an interview, like icebreaker. So what typically Irish likes to talk about, like as an icebreaker, kind of chit chat, icebreaker chit chat.
Do you know what? I
Hmm.
tend to find that Irish interviews are very formal. They're quite formal things. What we do get asked is, well, at what point would we be talking about the icebreaker about the icebreaker here?
Interview, like for example, like you just open up your computer, the recruiter came up in the screen, and you're like, hi.
Hi, thanks for seeing me today. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm delighted to be talking to you. Okay.
Yeah,
Hi, thanks for seeing me today. It's a pleasure to be interviewed here. I don't know if you agree. As long as you're nice and you're formal and
yeah,
you are kind and you're open, I think that's absolutely fine. Don't you start to read if you want to know what to say more. Read more and listen more to these things. Get into the habit of doing this, and we can find so many resources online if we're living abroad. But speak to people who formally talk to you like this. Okay, read websites, company websites, read sector websites which have these formal ways of speaking more on them. But thank you very much for seeing me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
yeah.
Something like that is fine.
Because I think the icebreaker topic, or if comes up, it needs to come from the recruiter, not from the candidate. So
Sure.
the candidate's there to, of course, prove themselves and to show their best self. But the interviewer is the conductor.
Exactly.
That's what I think. So if if like Joan, if I'm to answer this question, just say exactly what Gary said. Like, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure. Thanks for the time, or thanks for the opportunity, whatever you want to say, and then leave to the recruiter to conduct the rest of the interview. Of course, later you can, like come up with a few things. You can even check the recruiter LinkedIn, or the hiring manager LinkedIn or Facebook. A
Oh
bit
yeah.
of stalking, a bit of stalking before the interview is always good to see, like what they like.
Oh yeah, yeah. You have to show interest in the company, absolutely. And I would say that before you go in, absolutely, all the time, be interested in the sector. When you're in there, if you have any more questions, I guess as well, show that you're interested in the sector. Show that you want to work for them. Show that you know maybe what's going on in the sector. Show that you know something about their specific business. Um, don't be a stalker, but be interested in the area and show them that you love that area of work, whatever it might be. So yeah, absolutely, I would be very much in the habit of all the time in relation to topping up my vocabulary, um showing my students that I want to teach as well as I can. So I'm all the time trying to find methods of teaching as well as I can. I'm trying to find as many different methods as I can to adapt to your way of learning as a teacher. If you're a more of a speaky person, or if you're more of a writey person, or if you're a more of a listening person. So likewise, if you're going to work in a particular company, Google them loads. Research the area in relation to that. Something that I do all the time is I look at journals and things like that for my students in relation to different areas of work. And yeah, I just show that I'm a bit hungry. I think show you're a bit hungry is nice.
Yeah. Yes, very good. And always try to understand and to study the company culture, the mission, the vision, the values. They love it.
Yeah,
The American multinationals love it.
shows
LinkedIn was crazy about it.
shows that you care.
Crazy.
That you
Yes.
care.
Today I had an interview preparation,
Hmm.
and um, and the recruiter is a friend of mine. We worked together in the past. And when she figured out this client of mine was mine, like it was my client, she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna give you some tips and hints, in regards to the interview." She gave all the questions. She had all the questions. So today we prepped. with all the questions she was going to ask. And I was like, Jesus Christ, she gave you all the interview, like, so, the thing she was all the time saying, study the mission, study the visions. We are going to ask you that. So answer the core values of the company, the core values of the team. And I was like, exactly, it was exactly what I was about to say. But, that's it. And you have to study. You have to study.
Yeah,
It's me saying, the recruiters saying, it's Gary saying.
It shows that you're a little bit different to everybody else, I guess. It just shows that we're eager. And because, as we said, our grammar doesn't have to be that good. Our English doesn't have to be perfect. When we're in the door, yeah, we probably want it to be. But at the end of the day, yeah, that hunger can make us look like a really special person, a really special employee. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, great. Okay, that girl wants to work for me. So I'm definitely going to hire her because she's going to try really hard to resolve problems, or when something goes wrong, she's going to try and fix things as well as possible. And yeah, that's it. That's my thoughts on that one.
We have another question here. We have loads of questions.
Yeah,
how to answer this question? Why should I hire you? Would you recommend a mix of mission and visions? No, not mission and vision. Why should I hire you? So why should I hire you? You have to prove to the recruiter that you're the right person, that you are the person, the candidate.
absolutely.
So you have to focus on the job description. So you're going to repeat the job description. You're going to go back to the basics. Go back to the basics, guys. It's simple. Go back to the basics. The basics, job description. So what the company wants, job description. Then you're going to show or explain or prove that you are the best. How? Telling the recruiter your results, your achievements. How can you add value? That's how you answer this question. But the English way, it's completely, different, because in this part, like, you have to make sure it's not a story. It's not like the star technique. So it's not like, the tell about yourself is a story. It's your story. This question is more like, you have to be positive. You have to be certain what you say. It's what is affirmative? You have to be
Affirmative. You have to be you have to be definite. You have to be absolutely definite that what you see on that job description is what you can absolutely do. Okay, be sure, be there ready to convince them. Okay, so all you need to do, just like you said there, is to be able to say before you go into that job interview, you should hire me because that thing that's in that job description is me. It's me because the thing that I did between 2017 and 2021 is that thing there. The thing I did between 2014 and 2015 is that thing there. You need it. When I did that thing between 2017 and 2020, I got X results, and that was it. And that's me. That's what you want. Goodbye. I have the job.
Yeah.
Are we right?
I'm the one. Hire me.
That's it. Goodbye. I have the job. Hire me. Something like that.
Yes, exactly. Very good, very good. And like, finish the answer with an achievement, or something that you added value, for example, and you're bringing to the team someone that's always focused on results. As you can see in my previous company, I've achieved A, B, C. I'm also very good at dealing and talking to people. As you can see in my previous company, I was managing and I was liaising with management, upper management, and analysts. So I'm pretty well. I don't know, like, then you keep going. So how to add value? That's how you finish this question.
Exactly. They want to know what benefit you are going to be to the company, but they want to know, they want proof of that. They want specific, concrete ideas of this was this, this was this, this was this, this was this here. So if you can say that you actually were of benefit to another company in another time and you had X, Y, and Z results, that will be the same for them. They'll be delighted if they can hear that they need you to be able to work with X kind of software. You've done it before for 3 years. That's perfect. You've proven that you have the experience. What were the benefits of that for them? I don't know, your sales increased by X amount, or whatever it might be. I'm not going to go into the industries. I don't know the things that we could say in different industries. But if we could say that the results of my working on X, Y, or Z were this thing, then that can look super duper good too.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Thank you. So yeah, they would be my thoughts on how to answer questions. They would be my thoughts on a couple of things that might go wrong grammatically. But again, not to worry too much about your grammar, because it's something you're going to get in the door without perfect grammar. As you go up a little bit more, yeah, okay, we might feel a little bit self-conscious that our grammar is not completely tidy.
That's the problem. Like the non-Irish or the non-English speakers. So I'm not going to say Brazilians or the non-English speakers, okay, non-natives.
Mm-hmm.
When you go for an interview, or when you are under pressure, you just focus on the mistakes, and you instead of like actually focus on make yourself clear, make yourself understandable. So here Roger just asked me, but Tana, the recruiter checks more if it checks more my pronunciation or my grammar, Jesus, concordance, my grammar. I don't know how to say this. If like my pronunciation is better than my grammar, or what, like it's better, so it's not really the case. It's more like you make yourself understandable.
Of
Do you
course.
understand?
Your content, as far as I know, is going to be very important. From the experience that I know of the guys that I have, the content is going to be most important. Okay, so then when it comes to your English, one isn't really more important than the other. I think at a certain level, your grammar can look unprofessional if it's not really tidy. But that's way in advance, I think, after that. And again, in terms of your pronunciation, if you're understood, if you're not saying something that's absolutely misunderstandable, if that makes sense. I'm an English teacher and I think I've made up a word. I think that's important, but you should never go into an interview thinking I'm going to trip myself up here because my pronunciation's not like this, or my grammar is not like that. Both have to be pretty good. Understandable pronunciation, decent pronunciation, as I would say here in Irish English, and nice, tidy, clean-ish grammar. But don't worry about any of them being absolutely perfect. Not one of them is really important than the other. In terms of your pronunciation, if we're working on things like something that you could work on that does sound a little bit strange, is when you're saying past simples, for example, things like I work at instead of I worked. So say I worked. That would be really nice if you could work on a pronunciation, something pronunciation wise like that. If we're thinking about specifics with our pronunciation, also some other pronunciation ideas would be one moment.
Do you
Things
understand
like
that? So when we put the past simple, the ed at the end, so like worked, instead of saying worked, we say worked.
yeah, what a lot of people would do is they would say work at, or exactly, they would say worked. Like it sounds like a j. A lot of sometimes D's sound like J's, and a lot of C's sound like a ch sound as well. So if you say cat, it often sounds like catch. If you say maid, it often sounds like mage. There are little patterns that you can look at like that as well. Okay, there are times that when we say restaurant, we say restaurant. Now they're little things, nothing big that's going to trip us up massively in an interview, but they are things that we can work on if we want. But again, in answer to the question, which is more important, the pronunciation or the grammar aspect of that, they're both not deal breakers. You're not going to have to worry about not getting a job based on that. You will be brilliant if you can go in and you can answer the questions nicely, and you can say, because of my experience, this positive happened. That was the journey I went on at certain times. You can say that, and the positive result was X, Y, and Z thing here. If you can give concrete details like that, that's A1. After that, you can start thinking about saying different pronunciation, you could think about talking different pronunciation, saying different words differently, but don't worry about that too much. Don't worry about it too much.
I often say, don't waste your performance
No.
based on your English level.
The first thing that we agreed on, I remember the first time we met, the first thing we agreed on was that you have to go into an interview tomorrow. Okay? Don't wait to be good, because you will be good after the 10th interview. No, okay, I don't want to be negative with saying you're going for 10 interviews, but really don't waste, because your experience will be key and you will get better the more you do. Your pronunciation will improve the more you talk and the more you talk in stressful situations. Your grammar will get better because it probably is good on paper. Well, that's what I typically find. So on paper, it's good. So your grammar will get very, very good if it's not already extremely good. The more you talk. So all of these little details will come into play and your English will be absolutely super. You'll get the job and you'll have time when you're working then in the career that you want to, in whatever industry it is, to be able to improve those over time. But the reason that I say that maybe sometimes you need to improve your grammar or your pronunciation is because sometimes it's not perfect. But don't think for a second that you need to halt your job search or halt your job search, yes, today, because you're not good enough. You are. We're all good enough now to get jobs immediately. So go for it. Go for it. Go for it. Today, tomorrow morning, put your jacket on, get out the door and look for that interview, because then it will become so much more, it will become fun. And you'll realize that I think you'll get asked the same interview questions all the time. And it's nothing to worry about. And it's actually enjoyable. It's enjoyable. When you get that job, you'll be so proud, and you'll realize that your English was nothing.
Yes, that's what I always say. You have to try, you have to test, you have to keep going. It's a continuing learning, continuing improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them to all my clients, like I've been living in Ireland for what, 12 years now. I'm not fluent. I don't think my English is super good.
Yeah.
And it never do. Like there will always be words I don't know how to pronounce. I don't know what to say, or I forgot. Like I was like saying here, trying to translate the questions. I was like grammar, pronunciation, grammar structure. I know the word, but it just slips from my mind. Like it's normal. It's normal. I'm not native, so don't stress yourself trying to be perfect.
No,
I stopped stressing myself about English a long time ago.
Don't stress yourself. Stop. Exactly. Do what you do. Stop stressing yourself about English. Train your brain. Use that muscle, your brain, as much as you can to make your English as good as you can. But don't stress about it. And remember that the reason I said at the start that I started speaking Spanish and French 26 years ago is to show that I'm still going after 26 years. Not that it's so impossible that you can't learn a language in a short period of time, but you should take as long as you need. It's a big, long journey to learn this language, okay? And people who've been working from abroad in these companies here speaking in English don't speak incredibly good English. People from Ireland, working abroad don't speak incredibly good Spanish or whatever it might be, but it does get better over time. The more you just go out and enjoy the process, the more you go out and you train, that you work in the industries that you're trained in, and as we said, there's no need to stress about your English too much.
Yeah, they worry too much, and it's funny because like the clients that are kind of most fragile, right? The ones that need a little bit more boost and motivation. They are the ones that always come back to me saying, "Tana, I got the job, and my manager, his accent is just ridiculous. He's French. I can't understand him, and my English is better. And I can't believe, like I was afraid to get the job, and I was like, I told you, I told you."
it's always the way that you like the people or the ones who worry too much are actually totally relieved, because what you'll realize is the more you go into those interviews, nobody's English is perfect. Even if you're from Ireland, we have different dialects over here. We don't use perfect grammar. Of like that
I
goes without saying. We have different dialects of English all over the UK, all over the United States, and everybody's English changes. So don't worry about it. And furthermore, it's natural to make a couple of mistakes when you're in the interview, grammar wise, pronunciation wise. So what I would suggest is, as I just said, get used to going to interviews as much as you can. You find an interview fairly quickly, probably, or you'll find a job fairly quickly from your interview, and then you can enjoy learning English as you go along. What you'll realize is that you can pick it up from your colleagues. If you're working on different projects, if you're constantly trying to read a little bit more and, top up your listening skills in the right areas, like, to top up your reading skills, reading about the right service industry that you're working within, for example. But don't worry about your English too much. Just enjoy it. Enjoy the process.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. Glacier is just saying excellent live. So yeah, thank you very much. Roger say thank you guys. Thank you very much, Gary, for being here.
Thank you so much for everyone, and go on.
Share your knowledge, your time with us. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to be here, and if it'd be great to chat to you again sometime if you like. But in the meantime, if anybody wants to get back to me, ask me any questions about English or however I might be able to help you, please get in touch. And it'd be a delight to help out. And it was good to see you. And
We are
regards
gonna
to
put details here down below.
great stuff.
And
Well, as I said, by
loads
all
of
means.
respect.
Thank you, Anna. I just seen that now. By all means, get in touch and ask me any questions, any little doubts that we have anytime. But as we just said, don't worry about your English too much. Enjoy it. Try and improve as much as you can as you go along. Of course, because we all have to improve. But at the same time, go out and get a job tomorrow morning, because your experience that you're showing people how to do or how to make the most of in an interview is what's going to get you there. My bit is the easy bit. I'm just giving you a few little tips for along the way. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. See you next video then. Bye.
All the best. Bye bye now. Bye bye, guys. Bye, Tana. See you soon.